Everybody had a good long weekend. We are continuing with our discussion with Shabbat Mariv. We actually covered last week the Kriyat Shema and its blessings, which brings us to the Amidah. So today we have the art scroll here. The art scroll Siddur. We're on page bottom of 336. So just going to mention very quickly that before getting into the Amidah, which is the central piece of each service of each tefillah, we have a half Kaddish there, right? So we spoke about the Kaddish, I think, one of the previous weeks, and we mentioned that there are like 5 types of Kaddish. This is the shortest. It's called half Kaddish. And the half Kaddish is being recited only by the reader, by the Chazan. And the functionality of the half Kaddish is basically to tell us that there is a transition between the different units of the tefillah. Okay? So the tefillah, we mentioned that a long time ago in the beginning, that there are different stages or different units of the tefillah. And now what we're doing is we're transitioning from the Kriyat Shema with its blessings. And if you remember last week, we talked about this sandwich, the Shema sandwich, where we have 2 blessings in the evening and 2 blessings after. In the evening, we have 2 blessings before the Shema and 2 blessings after. In the morning, we have 2 blessings before and 1 blessing after. So to transition, to move from that unit of the Shema into the next unit, which is the Amidah, we have the half Kaddish. Okay? Now, let's go into the Amidah. So the Amidah for Friday night start on page 338. We have, let me just get more Siddurim. One, 2, okay. Okay. It's okay. There are. Okay. Page 338. So let's talk about page 338, the Amidah. Let's talk about the Amidah for a second. So as I mentioned, the Amidah is the central tefillah of each service. So we have in Shacharit and Mincha and Arvit, in each one of them, we have a Amidah. Now, what happens in the Amidah, the weekday Amidah? The weekday Amidah, we have 19 blessings, right? We call the Shmoneh Esrei, 18, therefore we have 19 blessings, right? Makes sense. Okay. The short story for that one of the brachot, one of the blessings, Vela Malshinim Al Tihi Tikva, is a later addition. So originally it was 18, later on became 19. Okay. When we get to the weekday tefillah, we're going to discuss that in depth. So during the week, we have 19 blessings in the Shmoneh Esrei, in the Amidah. What happens on Shabbat? On Shabbat, It's called Tfilat Sheva. Means that we have 7 blessings. Now, what's interesting is that during the week, whether it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, doesn't matter, the Amidah is gonna be the same. Right? It's the same 19 blessings 3 times a day. It doesn't, okay? What happens on Shabbat? It changes throughout the day. I'm going to talk about it in a second. Want to jump into the structure of the Amidah for a second. Okay? So every Amidah, this is very important, every Amidah, it doesn't matter if it's Shabbat, if it's weekday, if it's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, holiday, I don't care whatever that is, it's going to have the same structure. The structure means it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay. The structure is very similar, but it's different. What does it mean? It means that every Amidah has the same beginning and the same end. Okay, there's going to be some variations on the theme, but basically the same beginning and the same end. When I say beginning, I mean the first 3 blessings. Okay, so the first 3 blessings, what we call Avot, patriarchs, Gvurot, I don't know what that translated, God's might, and Dushat Hashem, holiness of God's name. Those 3 are always going to be there. Always. Doesn't matter if it's Shabbat, weekdays, Rosh Hashanah, I don't care what. Okay? Every Amidah is going to have those 3 blessings as the beginning. Go to the end for a second. The end is also 3 blessings. You don't need to flip. 3 blessings at the end, okay, which are Avodah, Retzeh, right? That's Avodah, the service. Then Modim, thanksgiving, and Shalom, peace. Those 3 are going to be also in every Amidah as the last concluding brachot. Okay? So, anytime we come to the Amidah, we know they're going to have the same 3 brachot in the beginning and the same 3 brachot at the end. That never changes. Never changes. Doesn't matter if it's morning, it's afternoon, it's a night, it's a Shabbat, it's week. Doesn't matter. That doesn't change. What changes is the middle. So during the week, we have 13 petitions there, right? Because if we have 3 in the beginning and 3 at the end, together it's 6. Usually 6 plus 13 gives us the 19. Okay? So 13 petitions. Now, what happens on Shabbat? On Shabbat, we refrain from requests and petitions. Okay? We don't do that on Shabbat. Right? Because the Shabbat is a day that we focus not on what we want or what we don't have, but rather about appreciating what we already have. Okay, there's a whole theological idea behind that.
Is it because God also rests?
Correct, absolutely. But the idea is much more than, yes, Miri. So Shabbat Chag is similar, is like the Chag. We're going to talk about it in a second. There's a theological idea here, which is connected to all the prohibitions of Shabbat as well. What is the idea behind it? Why can we, do X, Y, and Z, whatever also? We all know from the Torah there's like the 39 categories of melachot that are learned from the building of the Mishkan. And based on that, the rabbis decided you cannot do this, and you cannot do that, whatever, all that kind of stuff. Okay, fine. What is the theological explanation? Which the Torah doesn't really tell us? The idea behind that is as follows. When I am prohibited of doing certain things, I have to recognize my limitations. I recognize my limitations as a human being. Because if I continue doing that stuff, so let's assume that, oh, I forgot to do something before Shabbat. Well, tough. Sorry, it's Shabbat, you can't do that. If I'm going to continue doing that, that means, okay, I can fix it. I can fix that, I can fix that. I can do anything. I'm not limited. What's the idea behind that? Then I can get confused. I can start, I might start thinking that I'm God myself. I can do anything. Nothing can stop me. So this is kind of a weekly reminder that we're limited. Okay? So yes, from a halakhic perspective, these are like those 39 categories of prohibitions. We learned from the building of the Mishkan, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. It's very technical, and therefore we can do A, B, C, but we cannot do X, Y, and Z. Fine. But what's the rationale behind that? The theological, pedagogical explanation behind that is to recognize our limitations as a human being. And by doing that, if we recognize that, we can step back, we can take a step back and recognize what we do have and appreciate that. And Shabbat is a day that is dedicated for that stuff. Shabbat is a day that is dedicated for learning. It's dedicated for family. It's dedicated for community. We're not running after, running after our tail and trying to make a living and all that kind of stuff. It's a day of rest. Rest doesn't mean that I spend 9 hours in bed in the afternoon. That's not what it means. Unfortunately, people today think that that's what it means. Oh, it's Shabbat. I'm the rest. I'm going to spend the whole day in bed. No. Nowhere in the Torah, by the way, and also in the Talmud and later on in the Poskim, nowhere does it say that you should spend your day in the bed. No. On the contrary, it's just that you switch. It's a different focus. Your activities are different. Your conversation is different. Okay? Shabbat is a day that's supposed to give us a different perspective on the world. Be dealing with other things, community, family, quality time, Torah study, tefillah. We do it much slower on Shabbat. I don't know, much slower, but we try to do it a little bit slower, etc. Of course, yes, rest. It's like when I teach that, I often give that example of sometimes people go on vacation, right? So when some people go on vacation, and they just want to lay on the beach and do nothing, right? That's one type of vacation. The other type of vacation is you go to a new city and you start exploring. So you get up in the morning and you run from, one attraction to the other and one museum to the other, and you try to see as much as possible and all that kind of stuff, right? And let's assume that you had a great time. You come back and people, how was the vacation? Amazing. I had an amazing vacation. Did you rest? Technically, I didn't rest. I was running around seeing like the new city or a new place or whatever. That is Shabbat. Shabbat is kind of like, you have like a little bit of the rest, okay? So we sleep a little bit later, whatever, unless you have kids, like in my house, that from some reason on Shabbat, they wake up early. During the week, it's hard to get, but Shabbat, 6:30, they're up. So yes, there's this element of rest a little bit, but also this idea of, change of mindset. Okay. So that was a kind of a long explanation to also that is connected to this idea that we don't make personal requests on Shabbat. And therefore, those middle blessings of the Amidah, they kind of go against the nature of Shabbat. Okay? We're not asking for money. We're not asking for, all that kind of stuff on Shabbat. Okay, we focus on the other things. We have like 6 days of the week to focus on that stuff, on the and 1 day a week to focus on more spiritual matters. Fine. So we don't have that. But instead of those petitions, those 13 brachot, we have one bracha. And that bracha is called Kedushat Hayom, the holiness of the day. And this structure gives us 3 plus 3 plus 1. That's usually 7. That happens both on Shabbat and in the Chagim. On the Chagim. The only time that it's actually different is the Musaf for Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur is the same thing. So Kedushat Hayom itself is going to change, but the number of brachot or the structure of the Amidah is going to change somewhat. On the only time that it changes is the Musaf for Rosh Hashanah, where we have 9 brachot. Because instead of 1 middle bracha, Kedushat Hayom, we have 3, which is Malchuyot, Zichronot, and Shofarot. God willing, at some point we'll get to Rosh Hashanah later. It's going to be, I don't know when. Okay. So, but all the other times, whether it's Shabbat, whether it's a holidays, we have 7 brachot. Now, if this is called Kedushat Hayom, the holiness of the day, we can assume that when it comes to Shabbat, the theme is going to be Shabbat. Thank you very much. Okay. It's not a trick question. Okay. So we have... Okay. So, Kedushat Hayom is... the theme of Kedushat Hayom is going to be Shabbat. Now, what is unique about Shabbat in comparison also of the holidays? On the holidays, whether it's Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, I don't care, whatever, all those holidays, at the end of the day, they are, most of the times, a weekday. Okay, it's Pesach, but it's also a Tuesday. It's Shavuot, but it's a Thursday. It's Sukkot, but it's a Monday. Okay? And that tells us something very, very unique about Shabbat. Why? Writes the Abu Draham, that's not mine. The Abu Draham in the early 1400s writes, there's something, the nature of the day of Shabbat is different. What does it mean? It means that the day evolves and changes, call it from a spiritual perspective, whatever you want to call it, it changes. The morning is not like the evening. The evening is not like the afternoon, etc. We don't have that any other day of the week. A Sunday is a Sunday. It doesn't matter if it's Sunday morning, Sunday evening. Therefore, the tefillah during Sunday is the same tefillah. Meaning the Amidah, which is the central piece of every tefillah, of every service. Okay? Same goes from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, etc. Shabbat changes. The nature of the day changes. I'm not so sure exactly what it means, but from a spiritual perspective, whatever that means, it changes. Friday night doesn't have, let's call it, the same energy, spiritual energy as Shabbat morning, and Shabbat morning doesn't have the same spiritual energy as Shabbat afternoon. And because of that, it is being reflected in the tefillah. And therefore, the Amidah changes. meaning the middle bracha, Kedushat Hayom, changes. The Friday night, Kedushat Hayom, is different than the morning. The morning is different than the afternoon, and the afternoon is, etc.
I want to say that I know in a case that happened about 5 years ago, when you said Pikuach Nefesh Doche Shabbat.
Yeah.
So some people do not interpret it the right way. And they say, well, it's not so bad, can wait till Motzei Shabbat. And that was critical because that day it became deteriorated and finally it passed away. So I don't know, it's kind of questionable. A pikuach nefesh, it's the interpretation of somebody himself, not
Okay, but Pikuach Nefesh is something totally different. There's nothing to do with it. Tefillah.
You're talking about Shabbat.
I'm talking about specifically about the tefillah. Okay, let's now he takes it another step, and what he says is that Shabbat, and this goes back to ideas that we spoke about in Kabbalah Shabbat. Shabbat is compared to what? The bride, right? We call it in Lechadodi, we say boy kala, come bride. So there's this idea of marriage, wedding. Okay? And what he says is just like there are different stages in the ceremony, in the wedding ceremony, that is what happens on Shabbat as well. And those stages are parallel to the Amidah, or to Amidot, the plural of Shabbat. Okay? Let's look at that. The first one, if you look at page 340, so the Amidah, the Kedushat Hayom, starts with the words Ata Kidashta, you sanctified. Kidashta automatically is from the same shoresh, the same root as Kiddushin, which is wedding, but it's a specific part of the wedding, which is the Kiddushin, is what? It's the chuppah. Today, in our terminology, it's the chuppah. That's the Kiddushin. That's the first stage. That's what happened. I know, today we go in, this is the shmorg, I get it. But technically, that's not part of the wedding.
It's what's happening in the sukkah, in the chuppah, under the chuppah.
That's the Kiddushin.
That's what's happening.
Correct. Okay? So that is the Kiddushin. That's Friday night. Let's flip for a second to the Shacharit. What happened in the Shacharit? I'm on page 424 in the very top. It starts, Kedushat Hayom starts with the word Yismach Moshe. Moshe rejoiced. That is equivalent to what? Rejoicing in the wedding is the Simcha dance, which is, by the way, it's a mitzvah, right? To rejoice, to dance with the bride and the groom after the Kiddushin. That's what we do. You know, here in America, we call it the Hora. Okay, right? So that is that stage. So we had the Kiddushin, now we have the dancing. Chikud shel Simcha, or mitzvah. Okay? Then you go into Musaf, which is the next Amidah. What is the essence of the 466? What is the essence of Tfilat Musaf? We spoke about that kind of briefly, that every Tfilat Musaf kind of details the what? Korbanot, excellent. So the korbanot, right, the sacrifices. What is a sacrifice basically today, terminology? How do we...
No.
It's a barbecue. It's food. That's the korban. Right? So what happens it's the Seudat Mitzvah at the wedding, right? So that's what we have today in the wedding. We have the Kiddush, you have the Chuppah, then you have the dancing, then you have dinner, right? Okay, let's move into the last Amidah of Shabbat, which is Mincha, right? And that is on page very bottom of 516. Kedushat Hayom starts with the words Ata Echad v'Shimcha Echad. You are one and your name is one. What is one? Think about marriage. What happens after the dinner? Okay, more dancing, but technically what happens after dinner?
והיו לבשר אחד.
Exactly. Yichud. When they go home. Consummation. So these are the stages of a wedding. And what the Abu Draham claims is just like the wedding has those stages, Shabbat has those stages, and this is our wedding with Shabbat. And therefore, it's being reflected in the text of Kedushat Hayom. Okay? Good. Now, let's delve into the text itself. See what's going on over there. So remember, we said that there are several themes of Shabbat that are like kind of like coming, right? And what is the first one that we talked about? And we said specifically that is applicable to Friday night is the theme of creation. Creation. So here's what we see, right? You sanctify the seventh day for your namesake. The conclusion of the creation of heaven and earth. Very straightforward, right? It's the story of creation, God rested, etc. Of all days you blessed it, and of all seasons you sanctified it, and so it is written in your Torah. And guess what? What are those psukim? These are the psukim from this story of creation. When God stopped his act of creation. Okay, why this is important for us? First of all, it's one of the themes of Shabbat. So Shabbat is Zecher, we say it all the time, Zecher Lemase Bereshit. A remnant for creation. So the fact that we celebrate Shabbat, we keep Shabbat, is what? Is a constant reminder that God created the world. And that's the theme now. Okay, so if that's the idea, well, that means if God created the world, well, there's a lot of possibilities. Therefore, I have to listen to God and fulfilling the mitzvot. Therefore, I need to rest on Shabbat just because God rests. This is why I need to listen to God, because he created the world. Blah, 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 blah. Take it whatever you want. That's kind of the foundation for the whole thing. So Shabbat is the foundation for my entire behavior for the week. Okay? It's a conclusion, but it's also the beginning. It's an interesting, there's an interesting discussion in the Talmud. And basically, the Talmud says that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday are kind of connected to the previous Shabbat. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are connected to the following Shabbat, and kind of like get their energy, their juice from Shabbat this way. If you think that this is only allegoric, you're wrong. This is practical halacha. For example, I'll give you two examples. Look at the end of Shacharit, the weekday Shacharit, when we have Shir Shel Yom. Right? So I'm looking at page 164. On the Shir Shel Yom, the Psalm of Wednesday, right? We just said Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, getting their energy from the following Shabbat, right? Okay. So we say, Hayom Revi v'Shabbat Shabbat Revi Beit HaMikdash. Okay, today is the fourth day, meaning Wednesday of Shabbat, by the way. So the counting is always, it's the first day, the second day, third day, fifth day of Shabbat, meaning in the week. Okay, fine. And whatever, the psalm that was chosen is Psalm 94. Look at the end. Look at the page. The last two lines, 166, like in the middle of the page, that's already Psalm 95. It's the two first sentences from Psalm 95. Why? Why can't I? Every other day, we recite one psalm. Why here on Wednesday, I recite one psalm and a little addition from the next one? Why? Okay, because what is specifically there? Look at the text. Because beginning of Psalm 95 is the same psalm of Kabbalat Shabbat. This is how we start Kabbalat Shabbat. So it's a reminder already on Wednesday, Shabbat is coming. And it has practical halachot. I'll give you another example. Somebody's, well, today we live in a different reality, but in the old days, if you go on a business trip, okay, so if you go Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, you don't have to have set plans already for Shabbat. The assumption is you'll find something somewhere, whatever. However, if you go on Wednesday or Thursday, definitely on Friday, you cannot leave your house unless you know what's going to happen, where you're going to be for Shabbat. Okay? This became, like, by the way, a major question when people started taking cruises. Can you go on a business? Can you go on a ship? Can you go on a cruise on Wednesday? Bottom line is fine. Don't worry. You can take a cruise, even if it leaves on Wednesday or a Thursday or even a Friday, because you know where you're going to be for Shabbat. But if you go on that trip on Sunday, you don't have to make those plans. You can make those plans later on in the week. Okay, so it has practical ramifications for this idea. Okay. Back to our Amidah. So let's talk about for a second about this structure of Kedushat Hayom, holiness of the day, of that bracha, because that's going to come up in the morning and in the afternoon and Chagim and everywhere. So what happens is, so usually, not always, but usually there are three parts to that bracha. There's some sort of a opening. Sometimes it's a kind of a form of a piyut, not exactly a poem, not exactly, but it's an opening. Then we have quote or quotes, okay, verses to support that. And then we have the concluding paragraph, which is a piyut. Look at the bottom of 340. Our God and God of our forefathers, may you be pleased with our rest, sanctify us with your commandments, and grant our share in your Torah, satisfy us from your goodness, and gladden us with your salvation, and purify our heart to serve you sincerely. That paragraph, we're going to find that in the morning, in the evening, on the Chagim. It's the concluding paragraph of Kedushat Hayom throughout. It's going to have modifications because here, והנחילנו השם אלוקינו באהבה וברצון שבת קודשך. Interestingly, the term love, be'ahava, refers to Shabbat. When we go to the Chagim, we're going to use the word besimcha, joy. Okay? So there's this concept of simcha, joy, is associated with the holidays. Love is associated with Shabbat. When we have this image of the marriage, we understand why, and it makes sense. So to take it another step, by the way, nobody said you're supposed to be happy on Shabbat. It's great, it's fantastic if you are happy, but there's no mitzvah to be happy on Shabbat. There's a mitzvah to be happy on the holidays. Now, if you think that this is, again, it's just like a concept, it translates to practical halacha. For example, if someone is sitting Shiva, okay, somebody is sitting Shiva. So we don't sit Shiva, we don't do the public observance of Shiva on Shabbat. However, in private, you're still in Shiva. And the Shiva continues after Shabbat. What happens if a holiday comes? It ends the Shiva. Right? If somebody said 1 or 2 days prior to a Chag, and then a Chag came, it ends the Shiva. It cuts off the Shiva. Why? Because the concept of the Chag, which is simcha, joy, contradicts the nature of the Shiva to that extent that we say we can't expect anyone to be in a simcha on the Chag when they're sitting Shiva. And if they went through that process of they've been in simcha, they can't go back to it's supposed to change you in such profound way that you cannot go back to sit Shiva. Okay? So all that stuff has practical ramifications as well. Okay? And when it comes to the Chatima itself, what do we say? Baruch Ata Hashem, Mekadesh HaShabbat. We sanctify the Shabbat. When it comes to the Chagim, we're going to say something else. Sanctify, Mekadesh, Yisrael veHazmanim. Why? Because there's a fundamental difference between the Chagim and Shabbat. Shabbat is what we call Kviya veKaima. That means it's from the beginning of the world, God has established Shabbat. We spoke about that a little bit, I think last time. We said that the commandments, the laws of Shabbat were given to us later on, okay, at Sinai, etc. However, the concept of Shabbat, whatever that means, exists from the beginning of the world, from the story of creation. What about the Chagim? Chagim were given to us, okay? Were given to us with the Torah, okay? So before God gave us the Chagim, there was nothing. Right? There was no significance to the 6th of Nisan. There was no significance to the 15th of Tishrei before God told us this is going to be your holiday. Okay, now, who makes the final decision to when we're going to celebrate those Chagim? Beit Din, that means us, Israel. Right, because the Beit Din is the one that established Rosh Chodesh. And because based on that, when the Rosh Chodesh is, we calculate and we know when the Chagim are going to be. And therefore, the Baracha says, Mekadesh Yisrael, sanctify us, Israel, veHazmanim. That means that Israel sanctifies the times. And by the way, if we decide, we, the Jewish people, Beit Din, whatever you want to call it, decide that we're going to add another month, we're going to do that, right? It's a leap year. If we're going to decide that a certain month is set, Rosh Chodesh is going to be 1 day or 2 days, whatever, that's our decision. And based on that, the day of the Chag changes. Could be pushed in a whole month, right? Pesach is going to be a whole month later in a leap year.
Do we start all the holidays on Friday night? To make it easy for the women?
Well, you can talk to the Beit Din and let me know how that discussion goes. But that's a different, well, that's also in the power of the Beit Din, correct. But the point is that we have the authority to play with that. Even today, by the way, even today, not only today that the calendar, we don't determine the Chagim based on the Rosh Chodesh based on the Beit Din, but rather on a calculation from the times of Hillel. We do it based on a calculation. But even today, we have the authority to push things or change. So, for example, if Purim falls on Shabbat, we move it. Depends, right? Move, right? If Tisha B'Av falls on Shabbat, we push it. If Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, we pushed it. I get it. It is rabbinic. I get it. But still, so when it comes to all that stuff, we have the authority and we do that. And therefore, it's Mekadesh Yisrael ve'hazmanim. Unlike Shabbat, doesn't matter whatever the circumstances are. It's not, the Beit Din cannot say, whoa, nobody is ready for Shabbat, so let's push it another day. No. Shabbat is Shabbat. So that's kind of like a fundamental difference between Shabbat and the Chagim. Okay? After this bracha, we have the 3 brachot, as I mentioned, that we have them every day. It's the avodah, service, it's the modim, the thanksgiving, and shalom, peace. We're going to discuss those brachot in much length when we come to the weekday tefillah. And so therefore I want to jump into what happens after the Amidah. So look at page 346. Now, remember, we're in the Mariv service. And since we're in, yes? Yeah. Yes.
So we're not asking for peace, we're thanking God for giving us peace.
It's a form of request, but this is not a personal request.
The first few are personal and then the last few are communal, so.
I'm sorry, again?
Okay, even for weekday.
Yeah.
Those are also asking on behalf of.
Correct. But we, since the first of that unit, meaning Chonen Hadat, Shivinu Avinu Torotecha, Slach Lanu, all those are personal. It's already we refrain from the whole thing. By the way, the halacha is if somebody by mistake started saying those brachot on Shabbat, you continue saying them. There's no real prohibition on that, but we do focus on the communal rather on the personal. Here it's Shalom Rav Alayhi Tasim Leolam. Tasim is, right? You can call it as kind of a description, but you can call it also as a request. But it's not a request, a personal request. It's not bakasha. Okay, it's bakasha for bracha. That's different. It's not bakasha for refuah. It's not bakasha for parnasa. It's not bakasha for specific things. It's much more general. Okay. So we finished the Amidah, and what happens? After the Amidah, remember, we're in Mariv, and therefore, because we're in Mariv, there's no repetition of the Amidah, right? Every day, we have a repetition of the Amidah, both in Shacharit and in Mincha, but we don't have a repetition of the Amidah in Mariv. What's the reason? Because there was no Korban, right? The whole purpose of having a repetition is because there was a Korban, Tamid Shel Shachar v'Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, right? The daily sacrifice of the morning and in the afternoon. And since the Tefillah replaces the Korban, therefore there's an obligation on every person to recite the Tefillah. What do we do when we have people that are illiterate, people who don't know how to daven? So the Chazan functions, the Chazan fulfills that function, and they say Amen, and by doing that, they fulfill their obligation. Okay, so that is applicable for Shacharit and Mincha. In Arvit, there was no Korban to start with. As I mentioned before, it's the burning of the leftovers. And therefore, Tfilat Arvit started a long time ago as a reshut. It was not obligatory. It doesn't have the same level of obligation. One of the ways that it manifests itself, we don't have repetition. If it was to start with that, it was not obligatory, then we don't have to do a repetition of the Amidah. Okay? Fine. Everybody's with me? Okay. So we have no repetition of the Amidah also. We don't have it on the weekdays and we don't have it on Shabbat. Let's take a look what's happening there. There's going to be something that looks like a repetition, at least a mini repetition. We need to understand what's going on over there. Okay? So, second paragraph over there on 346 is Vayichulu hashamayim ve'haaretz v'chol tzvam. Hey, deja vu. What is going on over there? Right? We just said that. That was the psukim that we recited as in the holiness of the day of Kedushat Hayom. These are exactly the psukim. So what is going on? So this is what we call communal recitation of the same psukim. Heads up, we're going to recite those psukim a third time later on. When? At home. Kiddush. Kiddush for Friday night starts with those psukim again. Right? The story of creation, Shabbat of creation, let's call it. Okay? So what is going on? So some of the commentaries suggest that this is, since we don't have a repetition of the Amidah, so this is a communal recitation of those psukim to benefit those who do not know how to read. Fine. There's another explanation why we have 3 repetitions of those psukim is because we have 3 circles in our lives. The first one is the person. It's me, my relationship with myself, my relationship with God. Therefore, that recitation of the psukim is silent. It's part of the Amidah. Silent. Then I have this recitation. This recitation happens in public, in the community. It's the whole community together, whatever, whoever comes to shul. But the shul represents the community. That means it's my relationship with the world. Okay? It's the outside. Therefore, it happens out loud. And then I have another type of relationship. That's the personal relationship that I have with my family and my inner circle. And that happens at home. This is why I opened the Kiddush with those psukim as well. So this is how you have those 3 circles. What? Yeah. So this is how you have the 3 circles or the 3, I don't know, elements or whatever you want to call it in your life. You have the personal, you have the communal, which is your relationship with the world, and you have your inner circle, your relationship with your family, your close one, your friends. That is when you recited it.
It's fears. Not so
Fears,
second.
thank you. That's the word that I was looking for. Thank you. Okay, now, so after that recitation, we come to this thing. Look at the middle of the page. ברוך אתה השם אלוקינו ולא אבותינו ולא אברהם ולא יצחק ולא יעקב, האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון קונה שמיים וארץ. That's very, very similar to the beginning of the Amidah. Hey, what are you doing? What is this? Yes. We'll get there. Give me a second. So I just said we have no repetition in the Mariv. So what is this? It looks like a repetition to me. So first of all, it's called Me'ein Sheva, like the seven, meaning it's like the seven, meaning the seven blessings. So what happens? A couple of theories here. One, believe it or not, even in the old days, you had more people coming to shul on Shabbat than on the week. Shocking. So it means that also in the old days, not everybody came to shul every day. And so you had people that came to the shul on Yom Shabbat. They didn't know how to daven. So this is kind of like a mini me'ain, like the seven. One theory. Second theory. What happens after the Amidah? Basically, it's in every Mariv. It's basically the end of the davening. Now, we know that the synagogues, in many, many times throughout Jewish history, especially in Bavel, were outside, or in the fields, were like outside. Here's the problem. Walking home at night alone is dangerous. Rabbis don't want you to walk alone. Rabbis want everybody to walk together back to the village or wherever they are. Okay? Want them to go together. Well, what do you do when some people are like, they daven fast and they want to go? And some people take their time. Well, we're going to give them something to read in the meantime and to kill some time. And so this is what we have. Basically, it's a mini repetition that is supposed to kill the time until the people that daven slower, or another theory, those who came late to shul, believe it or not, there were those also, came late to shul and therefore they're behind. Either way, to make sure that everybody's going to walk together, we're going to establish, Rabbi said, we're going to put something there, kind of a time killer. It's not the right word, but you know, it is a time filler. Exactly, a time filler. So everybody's going to walk home together. And it's fascinating because look at what is going on over there. Look at the bottom paragraph. Magen avot bidvaro mechaye metim ba'amaro. That paragraph is a mini of the entire Amidah. I'm going to show it to you. Magen avot corresponds to the first bracha of the Amidah, Magen Avraham. And the bracha itself is called Avot. Good. Mechaye metim b'ma'amaro. Mechaye metim is the second bracha. Ata gibor olam Hashem mechaye metim ata Rab Leoshia. It's the second bracha. Ha'el HaKadosh it's the third bracha. Right? Ata kadosh v'shimcha kadosh u'kdoshim b'chol yom yalalu chasera. So that's the third bracha. Good. Then, hameniach lamo b'yom Shabbat kodsho, kivam ratza laniach lahem. This is all Shabbat. That is parallel to the middle bracha, i.e. Kedushat Hayom, that talks about Shabbat. Next, third line. Lefanav na'avod be'irav hafachat. What is na'avod? Avodah. What is the avodah? Is retzeh. The bracha of retzeh. Venode lishmo. Node is what? Modim. That's the next bracha. Is modim anachnu lach. And then what we have? Adon Hashalom, which is parallel to Shalom Rab. So this is a mini version of the entire Amidah in one paragraph. Now, that's not the only, by the way, version that we have of the kind of concise Amidah. We have another version, it's called Havinenu. Today, we don't really kind of use it. However, I think that we should use it sometimes in very specific circumstances. The Talmud comes, and we have two, by the way, two versions of a Havinenu. Havinenu is, we have both in the Jerusalem Talmud and in the Babylonian Talmud, two versions of it. Basically, one paragraph that replaces the entire Amidah, where one or two words in the Havinenu correspond to the entire bracha. So you have one paragraph where each one or two words correspond to a bracha in the Amidah. And that is what, according to the Talmud and actually the Poskim, you're supposed to recite in situations where you do not have time to daven. And I'm not saying you don't have time to daven because you were watching TV too late and that kind of stuff. No, I'm saying you're in the battlefield, for example. So what do we do today, which I think is ridiculous? So we go through it, we go through it very, very quickly. It's absolutely meaningless. You have no idea what you're saying. Oh, but I davened. The approach that the Talmud suggests is different. If you can't daven, and that means it's not reading it without any meaning. What it means is that you really understand what you're saying and you mean it, and therefore it takes time. And you can't do that because whatever extreme situations, then you read one paragraph, but do it right. It's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. Unfortunately, today, I don't know people who do that. But it's, by the way, some of the Sidurim even have it. They have Havinenu. I don't know the art scroll, I don't think so. But yeah. It's some of the Sidurim brings it, and it just give you kind of like, an idea of what the rabbis had in mind. So now, what is this El Elyon Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz that Hannah is asking about? El HaGadol HaGibor VaNorah El Elyon. Now, the bracha usually goes, Gomel Chasadim Tovim Vekoneh Hakol Vezocher Chasdei Avot Umevi Goy Livnei Bneihem Leman Shmo V'Yava. We go to Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz. What is? I'm sorry?
It's Bria.
No. Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz is a specific term that we see in Tanakh.
He's the owner. He's the.
It's specific phrase in Tanakh that we see. El Elyon is the same. It comes together the same story, and Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz is. It's the story of Avraham after the war. Exactly. This is what Melchizedek says. So since this is connected to Avraham, to Avot, right? And that's what we use. The bracha itself, and the Talmud makes a whole big deal out of it, and with this we're gonna finish. How the bracha in the Amidah ends, Baruch Ata Hashem, Magen Avraham. Right? The Gemara goes out of its way, Magen Scharilach, etc. It's Bameda, right? In the Brit Ben Abetarim, when Abraham has that vision, when God promises him that he's going to have descendants, he promises him the land and all that kind of stuff, all that story, he says, Bama Eda Ki Rashena, and the Talmud goes and says, Bechach Chotmin. So the bracha is called Avot, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu Elokei Avotenu, Eloi Avraham, Eloi Yitzchak, Eloi Yaakov, right? We mentioned all the others. By the way, in liberal liturgy is also Elohei Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. It's not our Siddur, but I wanted to put it out there, right? In liberal Siddurim, you have also matriarchs, fine. But the Gemara goes and says, Becha chotmim. Because of Abraham's belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Vehe'emin b'Hashem, vayachsheveha lo tzedakah. That's the pasuk in Bereshit. The Gemara says, Becha chotmim. The Chatima of the bracha is going to be only Magen Avraham, not Yitzchak and Yaakov. So now you can't really say the same text 100% because this is not a repetition, it's a Mariv. We don't have a repetition of the Amidah, but we need to find something that is on the same theme, or the same idea as Becha Chotmim, as Magen Avraham. Therefore, Koneh Shamayim Va'aretz, which also relates to the story of Abraham and Melchizedek after the battle of the 4 against the 5 kings. Okay, so that is this Magen Avot, which is a kind of a mini, as I said, it's a mini form of the repetition of the Amidah of Friday night, which takes us, if you flip the page, I'm just gonna do this paragraph very quickly. That is a repetition of what? Of the third paragraph that we had in the Amidah. Okay, so together with the opening, which symbolizes the first 3 brachot, we have the Magen Avot, which kind of highlights a word or two, kind of a recap of the entire Amidah, and then we have the concluding paragraph, which is taken from the Amidah. We have that kind of a mini quasi Amidah, a repetition of the Amidah to benefit those who are late, so they're not going to walk alone, or those who daven slower. Either way, so people are going to walk together. This is why, by the way, and this is the halacha, that when there's no minyan kavua, for example, people are gathering in a house to daven one time for Friday night, whatever, they have a simcha, whatever, that kind of stuff, they don't recite that. That stuff is only recited in what we call minyan kavua. Why? Why is minyan kavua? Exactly, because there's you don't have the issue of people walking together. If people got together, there's a reason. It's because it's a Sheva Brachot or whatever that is. They got together, right? They have a simcha or whatever. They're staying together, usually for the meal or whatever that is, right? They're together. They're together on a cruise ship. I don't know, whatever that is. So the issue of walking alone at home at night is not applicable, and therefore we do not recite that section that is called Me'ein Sheva, like the 7, which is Tfilat Sheva, which is the Amidah for Shabbat. After that, we have a full Kaddish, because full Kaddish always relates to the Amidah. So always when there's an Amidah, look for the full Kaddish. Okay, a full Kaddish has that line, Titkabel tzlaoton uvaoton dechol beit Yisrael. May the supplication and the prayer of Israel, of Beit Israel, be accepted before you, in the Shamayim, right? Before you. So what are those supplications and prayers? Amidah. Okay, those are the prayers. So there's always a connection between the Amidah and the full Kaddish. So even if you have like stuff in the middle, we're going to get to that, right? You can assume, so in terms of the structure of Tefillah, that stuff is related somehow still to the Amidah. Sometimes it's a weak connection, but still it's a connection. Okay, so that kind of like tells us the transition. After that, we have Kiddush. We're going to talk about that next week. Kiddush and Aleinu. Kiddush is something that we have, by the way, it's Minag Chutz La'aretz. That's based on the Babylonian Talmud. In Israel, nobody does Kiddush in shul on Friday night. It's a Minhag Chutz La'aretz. Okay, let's just mention it. It's because people were traveling. No, people were traveling. And what happens? They came, when people were traveling, they came to the shul. They knew that in shul, they're going to find a meal and very often a place to stay. Okay? You came to think about the 1400, 1500, 1600, whatever. You didn't, it's not that you could call people or check on, Facebook, who are my friends in a foreign land, okay? It doesn't work like that. What you do is you go to the shul and they'll take care of you. So many times the guests ate at the shul. And because they ate at the shul, this is where they make the Kiddush, because the Kiddush has to be in the same location of the Seudah. That's what the Talmud says, Kiddush bimkom Seudah. Right? There's one of the reasons, by the way, why we don't make Kiddush after davening on Shabbat morning in Chappelle's sanctuary, because the Kiddush is in the garden. Used to? But the Kiddush was not in the garden. The Kiddush was here. Kiddush was here. That's the difference. So, the halacha is that Kiddush bimkom Seudah. The Kiddush has to be in the place where you eat, because the Kiddush is connected to the meal. And so since they ate in the shul, the guests, so therefore there was a Kiddush already as part of the tefillah. Okay? And then which brings us to Aleinu. Aleinu we're going to discuss next week. It's a fascinating tefillah by itself. We're going to talk about that next week. Okay, next week, same time, same place. Somebody's going to remind me that we have to start with Aleinu. Okay, very good.